An 11-year-old child is in hospital with critical injuries after being struck by a transport truck this morning in Etobicoke. We're going to have the latest details straight ahead. There's no subway service on Line 2 in the West End due to a track fire yesterday. What you need to know about the delays to plan your commute coming up. Plus, it's been a violent week in the city, with police investigating 3 separate homicides in less than 24 hours. We're going to be joined by former Toronto Police Chief Mark Saunders to talk about that later in the show. Stay with us. Good afternoon and welcome to CP24 Live at noon. I'm Bakari Savage. Again, we continue to follow a developing story. This is from Etobicoke, where an 11-year-old child has been hit by a transport truck. It happened this morning just before 9 a.m. at Albion Road and Elmhurst Drive. And police say that the boy was crossing the street when he was hit. And paramedics tell CP24 that the child was rushed to hospital in life-threatening conditions. And right now, joining us with the latest details is Duty Inspector Jeff Bangild. Inspector Bangild, first off, we're talking about an 11-year-old kid. What can you tell us about how that child is doing right now?
Well, certainly, and the initial stages of this investigation suggested that the child was in life-threatening condition, and unfortunately I haven't received any update to change that. So we're still assuming that this child is in emergency care right now, being treated at Sick Children's Hospital for the injuries that occurred here at the intersection behind me. It's certainly a terrible accident, or a collision for that matter, and we're in the process of investigating that right now as we speak.
Inspector Bangild, what can you tell us about the intersection itself right now? Have things reopened? I see some movement behind you.
Yeah, things have reopened now. The at-scene investigation has been completed by our traffic services reconstruction team. Now, that doesn't translate to the investigation being concluded. The investigation is continuing on through analytics of the crime scene data, as well as the vehicle itself that was involved in this collision. It's going to be subject to a mechanical inspection to determine exactly what occurred here and what led to the injuries to this 11-year-old child.
And Inspector Bangild, I know that this investigation is still ongoing, still very early, but what can you tell us about how this happened?
So we do have the reliance of several people in the area that have provided us statements, as well as video footage that what transpired here. What we believe occurred here is that there was a transport truck heading northbound on Albion Road. There was our victim with a group of friends that were in the area as well. And unfortunately, the child entered the intersection where he was struck by the truck against the green light. So it appears that the vehicle itself had the right of way, and the child unfortunately stepped in the roadway at a very inopportune time where he was struck by the vehicle.
And Inspector, what can you tell us about the driver of that truck?
So he remained at the scene, and that truck has now been removed from the area, but he stopped very close proximity to where the collision actually occurred. So it appeared that he was aware of the injuries that may have happened, or that he'd struck something. He's remained at the scene. He was cooperative with the investigation, and obviously, given what occurred here, he's quite shook up as well. But the investigation's unfolding, and determinations as to how the investigation is going to transpire is still a matter of course.
And Inspector Bangild, as we wrap up, what do you want to say to people, especially about, just driving and being careful, because we know that the city has also launched a new campaign in terms of cracking down on speeding in areas where children are going to be walking to school?
Yeah, there's a lot to be taken away from that. I mean, we look at the time that this collision occurred, it was 8:50 in the morning. This is just when a lot of children are on their way to school, using public transit, walking in the area. And we have people that are commuting to and from work or their places of residence. It is a very busy place. It always is in the city. And it's one thing to be mindful of, that you can never underestimate how important road safety actually is. And being mindful of your surroundings and following the rules of the roads. And that's both pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles alike.
And again, this is at Albion Road and Elmhurst Drive, which has since reopened. Inspector Jeff Bangild with the Toronto Police Services, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And a pedestrian has been rushed to hospital. This is after being hit near Bathurst and Islington. Chopper 24 was over the scene at Bathurst and Burton Road. And paramedics tell CP24 that the victim was taken to hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. The driver did stay at the scene. The roads in the area, they're still closed for the investigation. And police are trying to identify 3 men after making an arrest in a shooting in Markham. So York Police, they've released security camera footage of the suspects. The shooting happened March 10th in a plaza parking lot near Markham Road and Stills. The victim did suffer non-life-threatening injuries. 22-year-old Rushvin Crofton was taken into custody yesterday after a search warrant was carried out in Ajax. He's facing 6 charges. And there are significant delays this morning for those taking transit in the West End. There's no subway service west of Jane Station due to damage caused by a fire on the tracks at Islington. That was yesterday. Repairs, they're still ongoing. Shuttle buses are available between Jane and Kipling stations. The TTC says to expect delays at Kipling, Islington, Royal York, Old Mill, and Jane stations. The TTC is urging passengers to explore GO and UP Express service. TTC spokesperson Stuart Green says that the closure could last into next week.
It severely damaged a box that contained a number of cables that are safety critical, things like signaling and communications. We don't know yet what started that fire. It's right along the fence line, so it may have been outside the TTC property. Again, we'll have to look into all of that. And in terms of how long it's going to take, we were in last night. We managed to make some repairs and replace some cabling on the communication side, which means we may be able to shorten that closure area to just Kipling to Islington, pardon me. So that's work that we're doing right now, but we're really looking at it could be a few days before full service is up and running again.
And heads up for tomorrow, there will be no subway service on Line 1 both ways between Davisville and York Mills stations for planned track work. Shuttle buses will operate. Extra TTC staff will be available to assist customers during this closure. Well, OPSEU is holding a rally and march in Toronto today to support LCBO workers as they negotiate a new deal. So last month, workers across the province, they held a day of action over fears that the government plans to privatize the LCBO. The union points to the government's move to allow alcohol be sold in convenience stores by 2026, saying that it will not stand by while the province puts money into the pockets of big box CEOs. The LCBO brings in $2.5 billion to the public coffers per year. And today's rally, it coincides with OPSEU's three-day convention in the city. Well, it might be a little bit cooler than normal today, but for this time of year, things are about to change. We're going to get to a high of 11 degrees today with a cool breeze and clear skies. And tomorrow is going to be a little bit warmer, but it will be overcast with periods of rain. Sunday is expected to be the warmest day of the year so far, climbing to 23 degrees, but there's also a risk of late-day showers. And the warmer than usual temperatures, they will continue through much of next week.
It's not going to stabilize because there are always changes in the weather and we have to deal with these fluctuations. We see a climb in temperatures, but that comes with a price. And those are the showers that we will have to contend with. And there might be even some thunder showers in the coming days as we warm up. But warm weather is really part of the deal in the spring. And, even last April, we got to 28 degrees in mid-April, April 13th and April 14th. In 2023. And the investigations continue into three separate murders, which all happened within hours of one another. One of the victims is 30-year-old Matthew Burgart, and police say that he was shot during a violent home invasion yesterday morning at Lakeshore and Long Branch. And Burgart was one of two people in the home at the time. So according to investigators, three suspects they targeted the townhouse just before 2:30 in the morning yesterday. So police say that Burgart didn't live at the home and that the suspects were looking for valuables that belonged to the occupant. Well, police are also looking for four people after a man was pushed off a balcony. This happened downtown. 38-year-old Ryan Williams was pronounced dead in hospital after a fall from an 8th floor balcony. This is at Church and Shooter, where he lived with his mom. And police are describing his death as an isolated incident, and they're still trying to figure out exactly what led to Williams' death, but they confirmed that there was an altercation before he fell. And the suspect, who police say goes by the name of Justice, is described as a man in his late 30s, approximately 5'9". He was last seen wearing a black hooded jacket, beige pants, and black shoes. Well, police are also asking for the public's help in identifying three people of interest related to this incident, 2 women and 1 man. So, of course, anyone with information, you are asked to come forward. And police say that a man who died inside of a Scarborough apartment earlier this week was also murdered. 40-year-old Muhammad Abdallah, who also is known as Muhammad Awad, died from stab wounds. Officers were called to an apartment building near Lawrence and Morningside. This was Wednesday morning around 11:30. This was for a medical complaint initially. Muhammad died at the scene, and police say that he did not live in the building. Suspect information has not been released. And for more on the rash of violence in the city, we're joined live right now
by former Toronto Police Chief Mark Saunders. So, Mark, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. So let's talk about this. 3 separate homicides, different parts of the city within 24 hours. What's your reaction?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, this is not unusual, but it is very unfortunate. You know, I remember working as a homicide investigator in the 90s, and there were times where you did have 3 homicides at the same time. It's challenging for the homicide squad, but I can tell you from an organization as a whole, with business continuity, all the resources are in place, especially for a homicide case. You'll get 100% of the necessary resources.
Okay, so putting this into perspective, also, let's talk about some solutions here overall when it comes to crime, because, you know, we do know that basically the ask of TPS in terms of the city budget, that was granted. So let's put that money to use.
Yeah. So here you go, classic example. During the budget period, the ask was for more resources, more officers. So the multi-year hiring is something that's essential. We're still not into the summer yet. I mean, there was frost 24 hours ago. So as it gets warmer, a lot of times we start to see trends where there's an increase of certain activity, especially when it deals with firearm offenses. So having the necessary resources to answer these calls and to answer the priority 1 calls that are going across the city 24 hours a day, it's essential.
And then along those lines, let's kind of, you know, put that money to use. How have you seen this being allocated over the years, and, you know, what changes do you see need to be enacted in the future in order to make Toronto more livable?
Yeah. Well, you know, first off, Chief Demkew and his executive command have a real firm understanding of what the necessities are for today's environment. And we have, the City of Toronto, it changes dynamically on a frequent basis. So dealing with some of the things, first off, cooperation and collaboration, working with other agencies. It's not about arresting. You're not going to arrest your way through these things. You have to have the strong partnerships to help with the preventative components to things. Then at the other end of it, you've got that bail. And that has been something that has been discussed. Whenever communities are feared of, you know, violent offenders, repeat violent offenders, which we have seen, there needs to be solutions on that back end as well. And when you put all of them together, you have better results.
And also, you know, speaking of results and looking at, you know, the police and the community all together, we do have to, you know, also talk about the reviews that have been ordered in terms of everything that's happened as a result of the Zamir case. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, the key and one of the most important components is the relationship with law enforcement and the communities that they serve. So when Chief Demkew basically ordered, here's what I'm going to do, arm's length, let others investigate, the sole purpose is to try to do everything you can to bring back that public trust. We need the public in order to solve crimes. That working relationship, if that is broken, then everything is broken. So making sure it's addressed as quickly as possible and making sure there's a lot of transparency, and then moving forward to make sure that everything can be done to keep your community safe is key.
And speaking of transparency, what recommendations would you say throughout this process would you give, you know, in order to maintain and, you know, build upon that public trust with Toronto Police?
Yeah, it never changes. It's not about your words. It's legitimacy is about what you say and what you'll do, and being continuous with those actions on a go forward, and that enhances public trust. People want to make sure that they feel safe, and they need to make sure that you know, they can have that cooperative conversation, and to make sure that the police serve the community and do it to the best of their ability, and making sure everyone's treated with the right respect and dignity.
And when it comes to that, let's talk about, you know, the work in the community with the Toronto Police Department, and then also the correlation with Crime Stoppers, because, you know, again, bringing this back to the top of the conversation, 3 different homicides within 24 hours in the city. Talk about the responsibility of the community as well.
Well, I won't say responsibility. First off, you know, Crime Stoppers is a fantastic tool. When you look over the years at the amount of arrests that have been made, that have been brought people to courts and successful conclusions where they've served their time, key and critical. But everything is going to be focal on community relationships. The community solves most of the crimes in the city. They always have. And I will tell you that there aren't a massive list of cases that are solved by Crime Stoppers. It has been the general public and the officers that go out there and do those investigations, and the cooperation of the communities. Listen, mothers want their communities safe. You want your kids to go out and be in parks and play and not worry about gun activity or things along those lines. So that cooperative relationship is what's key and fundamental to keeping communities safe.
And also, when it comes to keeping communities safe, we do still have the ongoing issue of auto thefts. What are you seeing right now in terms of what has been done? And where do you think that the city and the police could use improvements in order to make the city safer, to protect people's cars and homes, because people are breaking in order to get keys.
I know. So a couple of things. First, I think the police have done a good job, but leaving it just to them is not going to get the right solutions. There has to be a collaborative approach. You have to work with all levels of government. I like to see that the GTA law enforcement have worked together, because organized crime at the end of the day is responsible for this. So that approach is key and necessary. And then as well, we have to look at whether or not there is some sort of legislative things that can be put in place. And I know they've gone to summits at Ottawa and had those conversations, but now it's time to switch all of this to action.
Okay. Mark Saunders, former Toronto Police Chief. Hey, I appreciate you and your time.
Good seeing you.
Thank you very much. And coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association is expressing concern over what Toronto Police Chief Mark Dimke had to say about last weekend's Umar Zavir verdict. We're going to hear from a representative about that after the break. And the Canadian Civil Liberties Association has expressed concern over Toronto Police Chief Myron Dimke's remarks on the Umar Zavir verdict. So Zamir was found not guilty of all charges in the death of Detective Constable Jeffrey Northrup. This was in July of 2021. The CCLA says that they are particularly concerned about Dimke's comment, saying that, quote, he shared the feeling of our members who were hoping for a different outcome. While Dimke later clarified his comments, noting that he supported and accepted the jury's verdict. And for more on Dimke's comments, we're joined live by Shakir Rahim, lawyer and director of the Criminal Justice Program at the CCLA. So let's talk about this. What are your outstanding concerns, even after clarification from Chief Dimke?
Well, I think first of all, it's important to underscore the gravity of the comment that Chief Dimke made. After all the evidence against Mr. Zamir had been heard and tested, after a properly instructed jury had deliberated on the case and found him not guilty, Chief Dimke suggested and cast doubt on Mr. Zamir's innocence. When a chief of police does something like that, it's not enough to clarify the remark in a press conference. There has to be accountability, an apology, and an explanation to the public of why it happened and ensure that it won't happen again.
Okay, let's talk about specific ask here, because you laid that out, the accountability part. What does this actually look like? What do you want to see in practice right now?
I think there's two things we'd like to see. First, a clear statement by the Toronto Police Services Board and the Chief of Police that the initial statement made was not appropriate. And second, clear rules and policies that will clarify that for future decisions, including bail outcomes and criminal verdicts, police will not weigh in publicly, the Chief of Police and officers assigned to cases.
How does that weigh with public perception? Because there are some people who will look at this and they say, well, Dimke has already clarified his statement, but they're asking for more. Can you talk about that?
The police have an immensely powerful position in our society and within the criminal justice system. And it's important that when it comes to whether an individual is innocent or guilty of a serious crime, that it's crystal clear who is responsible for making that determination. While it is a start that Chief Dimke has recognized that the jury was appropriate in making that verdict, there has to be greater accountability and ownership of why that initial statement was wrong, and equally so, rules in place to ensure it does not happen again.
Does any of that ownership and responsibility come in the form of the reviews that Dimke ordered?
I think in part, but unlike some of those reviews that have been ordered, this is something that is completely within the control of the civilian oversight body of the Toronto Police to comment on, and within Chief Dimke's own control to clarify and ensure he makes a proper statement.
And going back to the specific ask from Dimke and TPS, have you heard anything?
We have not heard anything to date. We have sent a letter to the Toronto Police Services Board copying the chief outlining our concerns, and we have asked for meetings with the Toronto Police Services Board, and so far we have a meeting with one member, but we're still waiting to hear with an official response from the board chair and other members.
And when is that meeting scheduled for?
That meeting is going to be next week, and the next board meeting is on April 30th, so we're hoping as well, either there or in a future meeting, to publicly represent our views further. And
again, with this meeting, are you hopeful?
I'm cautiously optimistic that there's going to be some reception to our concerns, but our role, of course, as the CCLA is to make sure that these actions are taken when they need to be taken, and so we will continue to push for accountability in this matter.
And how would you like to wrap this up?
Well, I think I would just underscore that this isn't just about the Zamir case. There are many cases where people are found innocent or released on bail where the police have weighed in and cast doubt on decisions. That entire practice as a whole needs to stop.
Okay. Shakir Rahim, lawyer and director of the Criminal Justice Program at the CCLA. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, the city is marking its earliest ever opening of park washrooms and drinking fountains. We're going to have more on that story after the break. The city of Toronto is completing the earliest ever opening of seasonal park washrooms and drinking fountains. Specialized technicians, plumbers, and cleaners, they have to inspect and sometimes do repairs at 128 seasonal buildings all across the city. Mayor Olivia Chow was at Woodbine Beach Park this morning to announce the early openings.
When you hang out outside, when you have to go, you just have to go. So what we are doing now is we are opening the washrooms earlier this year. It's not yet May, but we have a head start. 80% of the City of Toronto washrooms are now open. There will be more rolling out next week.
All right, Mayor Chow took the sign off of a closed washroom at Woodbine Beach following her announcement today before filling up her water bottle at the tap. You see it right there. The city says that remaining washrooms will all be open by next Friday. And coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, Honda announced a multi-billion-dollar investment in Ontario's electric vehicle industry. We're going to be joined live by Green Party leader Mike Schreiner after the break for reaction to this deal. Stay with us. An 11-year-old child is in hospital with critical injuries after being struck by a transport truck this morning in Etobicoke. We're going to have the latest details straight ahead. There's no subway service on Line 2 in the West End due to a track fire yesterday. What you need to know about the delays to plan your commute in moments. And the Leafs are getting set for a big Game 4 against the Bruins tomorrow night as they look to even up their first-round playoff series. We're going to have a preview of the game coming up. Good afternoon and welcome to CP24 Live at noon. I'm Bakari Savage and we continue to follow a developing story from Etobicoke. This is where an 11-year-old child has been hit by a transport truck. It happened this morning just before 9 o'clock at Albion Road and Elmhurst Drive. And police say that the boy was crossing the street. That's when he was hit. Paramedics tell CP24 that the child was rushed to hospital in life-threatening condition.
We have a number of officers that are here in place from traffic services reconstructing the collision itself to determine exactly what happened as well. The truck itself will be subject to a mechanical investigation in terms of its operation at the time of, and see if there's any contributing factors to that. This is an investigation that's in its infancy, so there's a number of factors that need to be considered, and the investigation at this point is going to determine any liability on anybody's part or if there's charges that will be laid. At this time, the concern that we have is the well-being of the child, and we're waiting to hear back from the hospital what the status is of that individual.
Police say that the area has been expected to be closed for several hours for the investigation, but when we were last talking to Inspector Bangild, we saw that the intersection had reopened. Well, a pedestrian has been rushed to hospital after being struck near Bathurst in Islington. And Chopper 24 was over the scene. This is at Bathurst and Burton Road. And paramedics tell CP24 that the victim was taken to hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. The driver did stay at the scene. Roads in the area are closed for the investigation. And police are trying to identify 3 men after making an arrest in a shooting in Markham. So York Police, they've released security camera footage of the suspects. You're looking at it right here. The shooting happened March 10th in a plaza parking lot near Markham Road and Sills. The victim suffered non-life-threatening injuries. 22-year-old Roshman Crofton was taken into custody yesterday. This is after a search warrant was carried out in Ajax. He's facing 6 charges. And there are significant delays this morning for those taking transit in the West End. There's no subway service west of Jane Station due to damage caused by a fire on the tracks at Islington yesterday. Repairs are still ongoing. And shuttle buses are available between Jane and Kipling stations. The TTC says to expect delays at Kipling Islington, Royal York, Old Mill, and Jane stations. The TTC is urging passengers to explore GO and Up Express service. TTC spokesperson Stuart Green says that the closure could last into next week.
We do have about 75 shuttle buses out there running. Unfortunately, they're running in mixed traffic along Bloor, which can get quite busy. So the best advice we can give to people is to plan ahead. A really significant piece of information, though, is to, if at all possible, if you're coming in from the West End, consider taking the Lakeshore West GO transit line. That's an all-day service, and you may have to go south to get to that, but you can do that on a TTC fare. And as well, Kipling does have service, GO train service as well. I believe it's only a rush hour service in the mornings and afternoons. And of course, if you're going to or from the airport, the Up Express is an excellent alternative. So right now, we're looking at ways we can shorten that closure period, that closure area, and make sure we can get people through as quickly and safely as possible.
And a heads up for tomorrow, there will be no subway service on Line 1 both ways between Davisville and York Mill stations. It's because of planned track work. Shuttle buses will operate. Extra TTC staff will be available to assist customers during this closure. Well, OPSEU is holding a rally in Toronto this hour. Here's a live look. It's to support LCBO workers as they negotiate a new deal. Again, this is a live look as demonstrators, they marched downtown on Front Street near the Metro Toronto Convention Centre. Last month, the workers across the province, they held a day of action over fears that the government plans to privatize the LCBO. The union points to the government's move to allow alcohol to be sold in convenience stores by 2026, saying that it will not stand by while the province puts money into the pockets of big box CEOs. Well, the LCBO brings in $2.5 billion to the public coffers per year. Today's rally coincides with the OPSEU's three-day convention in the city. And with that, it's 12:34, 11 degrees. Let's get an early look at the roads this afternoon with Adjoa and Siayebois. Adj, are a lot of people going out for lunch, or they stay at home?
You know what? People are going out for lunch. People have half days a lot of the times on a Friday. So it is a busy go. Feels like rush hour, actually. And then adding to all of those delays, Bakari, you're running into problems if you're out on the major routes on the 403. This is the westbound lanes of the 403 on the approach to Upper Middle. You will find the left lane blocked following this collision, quickly creating a jam up from well before Dundas. So just a heads up as you do make your way through this area. Also, problems just cleared. Eastbound 401 in the Express, east to James Snow Parkway. We were dealing with a stall. It had the right lane blocked, cleared away seconds ago. And it's a tough go on the westbound 401 because of volume delays and long-term maintenance that started yesterday. Express lanes reduced. The lanes are between Avenue Road and Dufferin because of this ongoing road work. And it looks like we have a situation. This is on the 410 northbound on the exit ramp that does take you to Steeles. It looks like it might be clearing, but it is the center lane that is blocked following a stalled vehicle. I'll send it back to you, Bakari.
The CP24 traffic report is brought to you by CapitalDirect.ca.
Investigations continue into three separate murders that all happened within hours of each other. One of the victims is 30-year-old Matthew Burghardt. Police say that he was shot during a violent home invasion yesterday morning at Lakeshore and Long Branch. Burghardt was one of two people in the home at the time. And according to investigators, three suspects targeted the townhouse just before 2:30 in the morning yesterday. Police say that Burghardt did not live at the home and that the suspects were looking for valuables that belonged to the occupant. Well, police are looking for four people after a man was pushed off a balcony downtown. 38-year-old Ryan Williams was pronounced dead in hospital after a fall from an 8th-floor balcony at Church and Shooter. This is where he lived with his mom. And police are describing his death as an isolated incident. They're still trying to figure out exactly what led to Williams' death, but confirmed that there was an altercation before he fell. And the suspect, who goes by, or rather, police say that he goes by the name of Justice, is described as a man in his late 30s, approximately 5'9". He was last wearing a black-hooded jacket, beige pants, and black shoes. And police are also asking for the public's help in identifying three people of interest related to this incident: 2 women, 1 man. Anyone with information, you're asked to come forward. And police say that a man who died inside of a Scarborough apartment earlier this week was also murdered. 40-year-old Mohammed Abdallah, who also goes by Mohammed Awad, died from stab wounds. Officers were called to an apartment building near Lawrence and Morningside Wednesday around 11:30 in the morning for a medical complaint. Mohammed died at the scene. Police say that he did not live in the building. Suspect information has not been released. Well, Honda announced yesterday that it's going to be making a $15 billion investment in Ontario. So the project is going to see the automaker build an electric vehicle battery plant next to its assembly facility in Allison. That facility will be retooled to produce fully electric vehicles. Honda will also set up 2 battery parts facilities elsewhere in the province. The project is expected to create 1,000 new jobs and retain more than 4,000 existing ones. The deal does not involve production subsidies, but is expected to include up to $5 billion in public money. The Honda facility will be the 3rd electric vehicle battery plant in Ontario. And for a reaction to Honda's announcement, we're joined live by Ontario Green Party leader Mike Schreiner. Thank you very much for taking time to speak with us this afternoon. I'm taking a look at the letter. Let's get your reaction here.
Well, I think it's great that we're seeing more investment in EV manufacturing in Ontario. It's an important part of us taking advantage of the jobs and prosperity in the new climate economy. But we also need the government to ensure that Ontarians can actually afford to drive electric vehicles and that we have the infrastructure in place to support electric vehicle drivers so the people of this province can take advantage of the low cost of operating an EV. So we're calling on the government, bring back rebates for the purchases of new electric vehicles in Ontario, bring in a new rebate program for purchasing used electric vehicles, and build out the infrastructure we need to charge electric vehicles so people across the province can drive them. I'm up in northwestern Ontario right now. We simply don't have the charging infrastructure here for the people of this part of the province to take advantage of low-cost operation of an electric vehicle.
Okay, let's parse this out a little bit. We have 2 things, affordability and infrastructure. Let's start off with affordability. It's going to be, 2035, where every new vehicle sold has to be electric. What does affordability mean? What does that look like?
Well, we want to lower the cost of upfront cost of purchasing a new electric vehicle. You see electric vehicle sales in Quebec and British Columbia, for example, far exceed what we have in Ontario. That's because they have rebates on top of the federal government's rebate so that electric vehicles are actually affordable for ordinary Ontarians. And we're starting to see a growing used car market for electric vehicles, and we're advocating for a rebate program for used cars as well. This is a great opportunity to make electric vehicles affordable, and it's so much cheaper to operate an electric vehicle, so it's a way to address the affordability challenges people in the province are currently facing.
Okay, and big thing, infrastructure. You just pointed out where you are and the lack of charging stations. How does this all come together? I mean, people have to charge their cars in order to get around, right?
Well, yeah. So in southern Ontario, I live in Guelph. I have an electric vehicle. Very easy to get around southern Ontario driving a fully electric vehicle. But you get in some parts of the province, rural and remote parts of the province, and it becomes much more difficult because the charging infrastructure is just not in place. So I'm calling on the government. Let's invest in building out the charging infrastructure so people can confidently drive in all parts of this province, knowing there's a place to charge their electric vehicle. And I'm also calling on the government to reverse their decision to not include electric vehicle charging within the building code in Ontario so that when new homes or new apartments are built, there's actually charging infrastructure built in so people are confident they're going to have a place to charge their EVs.
Okay, so let's talk about the follow through here in terms of, getting these rebates back and everything else associated with this. Let's talk about the uphill battle.
Well, I mean, Doug Ford, unfortunately, when he was first elected, literally ripped charging stations that were already installed in some parking lots. He took and reversed the building code mandate that would have required electric vehicle charges to be part of new building construction. Those were huge mistakes. The government needs to say, not only are we going to embrace these subsidies to incentivize the building and manufacturing of electric vehicles, but we also need to ensure the people of Ontario can afford those vehicles and that the infrastructure is in place so they can confidently drive those vehicles anywhere in the province.
Okay, Ontario Green Party leader Mike Schreiner, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Hey, my pleasure, anytime.
Well, Air Canada is apologizing today after Assembly of First Nations Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Napanak posted on social media yesterday that her ceremonial headdress was not permitted in the overhead storage on a flight. So Napanak said that her headdress was taken away and it was put in a garbage bag in a move that left her hurt feelings. Well, she wants Air Canada to have a protocol for First Nations people so that they're not harassed when carrying sacred items. The Federal Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations is calling on Air Canada to, quote, make things right. She says that the incident left her, again, with her feelings hurt, and that Air Canada needs a protocol for the First Nations people. And Air Canada did release a statement about the incident today saying, quote, we have reached out directly to speak with National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Napanak to better understand and apologize for her experience. We are also following up on this matter internally. We will be reviewing our policies as a result of this regrettable incident to ensure special items such as this, whose significance we appreciate, are able to travel in the cabin with customer consistency. Statistics Canada's survey data shows that median income, it fell to $70,500. That was in 2022. That is the most recent information that they have on the state of Canadian household incomes after tax. Stats Canada says that the rate of inflation in 2022 was 6.8%, while incomes decreased 3.4% in that year. The government agency says that the reason for the decrease was a decline in government transfers related to COVID payments, as well as modifications to EI, also related to the pandemic. Well, the former publisher of the National Enquirer returns to the stand for a fourth day at Donald Trump's hush money trial. Defense lawyers are going to try to poke holes in David Pecker's testimony that he helped bury stories that were embarrassing to Trump during the 2016 election. He says that the catch and kill scheme involved buying the rights to potentially damaging stories and then scrapping them. Well, Trump has pleaded not guilty to 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. And the former president continues to assert that he is being persecuted.
I want to start by wishing my wife, Melania, a very happy birthday. It'd be nice to be with her, but I'm at a courthouse for a rig trial. It's a rig trial. Terrible. But we're doing very well in this rig trial. Everybody knows it. Yesterday was a big day, but I do have to begin by wishing Melania happy birthday. She's in Florida. I'll be going there this evening after this case finishes up, this horrible, unconstitutional case.
And Trump also complained this morning that the courthouse is freezing cold, so he said that he believes it's intentionally being kept that way. Well, coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, the Leafs are hosting the Bruins and a big game for as they try to tie up their first-round playoff series before heading back to Boston. We're going to have a preview after the break. The Maple Leafs have another day before they try to even up their series against the Bruins this weekend, so Toronto's down 2-1 in the first-round playoff series after Wednesday's 4-2 loss. Forward William Nylander has missed the first 3 games of the series with an undisclosed injury, and his status for Game 4 is unknown. Puck drop at Scotiabank Arena is set for 8 p.m. tomorrow. And then on the field, the Blue Jays are going to be back at home for a weekend series against Shohei Ohtani and the LA Dodgers.
And this one drilled to left field, and there's no doubt about it.
Well, the Boys of Summer wrapped up their 4-game set against Kansas City yesterday. The Royals got on the board first with a 2-run home run from catcher Salvador Perez. Ernie Clement would get the Jays' only run, but an RBI single. Well, the game was delayed after the 5th inning as rain poured down at Kauffman Stadium. And then after more than 3.5 hours, umpires called the game due to poor field conditions. And for a quick preview of all the sports happening in the city this weekend, we are joined live by TSN's Matt Cause. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I don't know how we're going to do this quickly, but we'll try our best.
Okay, so let's start off with Leafs. Big Game 4 coming up tomorrow night. What do they have to do to win this one?
What they have to do is score more goals. How about score more than 2 goals, something they've only done once in their last 10 playoff games. Now, they'll get a boost. It looks like Nylander will be back on Saturday. He was practicing on the 3rd line. He was practicing on the 2nd power play unit, which is the other issue. Toronto is supposed to be able to score goals. That's how this team is built. And the power play has been non-existent. It's like creating parachutes but putting holes in them. It's nice to have a parachute. It's better if they work. That's like the Leafs offense. That's what they're supposed to do, and they haven't been able to get it done.
Okay, let's go back to Nylander. He was at practice today. You said you are expecting him to play tomorrow.
Yes. Yep. We've seen the reports from all of our reporters, from Mark Masters, Jonas Siegel from The Athletic. He is on the ice. He's doing things we haven't seen him do before, as I mentioned, on the power play unit. So I expect him to play tomorrow night. The question is, will he be on the third line with Pontus Holmberg and Kelly Yarncroc? Do they move him up? Maybe do a super line with Tavares and Marner. I expect the first line to be the same with Matthews, with Max Domi and Tyler Bertuzzi.
Okay, so speaking of Austin Matthews, missing practice, saying that he's taking a maintenance day. What's going on here?
What we've heard is that, he was battling through a bit of an illness the other day, so I would expect some sort of flu or flu-like symptoms. I think that's the term that teams use to try to be vague, but I think that's why we don't see him on the ice today.
Okay, switching over to the Diamond. Shohei Ohtani, the LA Dodgers, are going to be in town this weekend. Are you expecting him, to be booed after the chaos of the offseason? I mean, should fans be mad or relieved?
Absolutely not. He should be booed. It's not his fault. Who needs to be booed is whoever the people out there that were doing those rumors that were saying he was on that private plane. We had half an hour. I remember it so well on that Friday where we're thinking Shohei Ohtani is coming to Toronto, and then it wasn't going to happen. He said he met with the team. He was impressed with the team and the city and the fans, saying all the right things. But no, I think what fans should feel when they see him at the plate is we should just be supremely sad that he's not with the Blue Jays. He's had 6 home runs already. He's hitting around 360, and that's after getting off to a slow start. Shohei Ohtani would have been perfect for the Blue Jays, but alas, he's with the Dodgers.
Yeah, I remember that frenzy. His plane is coming into the airport. We got to get there. Well, speaking of, what about Shohei's off-field legal issues with his translator, the distraction? Put this all together for us.
You know what? It's funny. That story was this huge spike, and then it went away. And it looked like, there was so much work being done by investigators, private investigators. I believe it was like the FBI was involved. And what it looks like in the end is that Shohei Ohtani got duped by someone he thought was his close friend, the interpreter, who had been with him since 2018, who had been with him to help him adjust to North American life, and in the end stole millions and millions of dollars, making upwards of like over 100 bets a day. That was a crazy story, but from everything we've seen in the evidence, Shohei Ohtani was not aware of it. I look at it more as a tragic and almost embarrassing story for Shohei.
Okay, so the Dodgers, they have a good 16-11 record. Jays are sitting at 500. What do they have to do to beat LA?
What they have to do to beat LA is the same thing the Maple Leafs need to do against Boston. They've got to score. Springer, Bichette, and Vlad, all those guys are not hitting. They're hitting collectively around 220. They only have one more home run combined, those 3 guys, than Shohei Ohtani does. It's as simple as that. The pitching has been good. Jose Barrios was great even in the loss yesterday. It's about the top of the lineup getting it done. If that doesn't happen, Toronto is going to miss the playoffs.
Okay, is this going to be a good weekend to be a Toronto fan?
Yes, because it's going to be exciting and don't drive, walk, take the subway, go train. But yes, it'll be a very exciting weekend because I guarantee you the Maple Leafs are going to win. Do you know how I know that? Because they lost the last game. We know what's going to happen. The series is going to go 7. Each team's going to win, lose, win, lose. We're going to be filled with despair and then joy and then despair and then joy, and then Game 7 will happen and we'll all hide.
Oh, my God. GSN's Matt Cause telling it like it is. Thanks, Matt.
Absolutely.
Well, switching things up, Sophie Gregoire-Trudeau has spent much of her life in the spotlight as a television host, a volunteer, and in politics. And she joined CP24 Breakfast today to talk more about her new book, which is part memoir and part self-exploration.
It is absolutely never too late to look at your mind, to look at your trauma, to look at your, your history from your childhood bond of attachment. And I talk about that in the book, how somebody took care of you by touch, by sight, by care, by presence, by playfulness, kind of like validating your perception of reality and yourself as a child from 0 to 3. And then that's a visceral human need that everybody has. And then there's authenticity. Being able to express who you truly are. Everybody's unique. Everybody has a unique personality. But without having to change your behavior to feel loved. We all do it. We do it as kids, with our parents. We do it with our friends, with our loved ones, in our romantic relationships. And it's okay. But as long as we know where we move from.
Gregoire-Trudeau says that she learned a lot about raising children, especially teenagers, while writing Closer Together, Knowing Ourselves, loving each other, and that the book can be a helpful tool for parents. Well, thank you for watching CP24 Live at Noon.